get started. So the topic for today is going to be the mindset and the methods of raising capital. So a lot of you are probably trying to get closer to investors and so on. So we're going to try to do our best to help you out in this process. My name is Eli David Rokah. I'm the CEO of StartupBlink. We'll speak a little bit about StartupBlink in a second. And before we start talking about the presentation, I'll just say that this is done together with with the support of IBM. IBM has a very interesting startup program that I think is relevant for absolutely everyone. It's relevant for startups, for software developers, accelerators. It's free, and basically, if you join it, you can say that one, you're an IBM alumni, one of the best companies in the world. They give you mentorship. You can pitch your solution to IBM clients and investor network, and you can use credits for IBM solutions like Watson and other cool AI stuff. So definitely recommended to consider joining their startup program. I do recommend to all of you, by the way, join as many programs as possible, especially if they're free. You never know where your big break is going to come from. So that's something that makes a little bit of sense generally. Yeah, I think we put it in the chat, so that's the link that you would see in the chat. But let me just type it here: IBM.startuplink.com. I think that's the link. So yeah, go for it. Definitely a good program. We also have other programs and other things that we're going to share with you. Whoever registered for this webinar is going to be on our newsletter, and we're going to share with you all the interesting opportunities. So today we're going to start talking a little bit about, first of all, StartupBlink in general and how it's connected to this topic. Then we're going to talk about a little bit about risk and debt, the challenges of raising capital, investment rounds, sources for funding your startups, and steps of raising capital. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free in the chat. I'm going to try to check it from time to time. I see that we also have people who introduce themselves from Milan and from Germany, so that's great. We're very international. Beverly Hills in California, South America. So that's really nice to see that we have a nice variety of participants from all over the world today. So a little bit about StartupBlink. What do we do? It's a global startup ecosystem map and research center. By the way, everyone can add their startup to the map. Once you're going to add your startup to the map, something interesting is going to happen. You will also be able to see your rankings in your city, in your country, in your industry. So that's sort of like an interesting analysis tool that is relatively fun to use. So that's and it's free to join the map at startupblink.com. One other thing that I want to tell you is that basically, if you can add yourself to directories like StartupBlink, like Crunchbase, and so on, it's good because you get more visibility. And for the topic of today of investors, those are the tools investors are using in order to source their next investment. So it makes sense for you totally to increase your, let's say, visibility out there, especially in global directories of startups. So that's a small thing. Go to the next slide. A little bit about what we do and why it might be relevant for you. So basically, we're doing a lot of insights about global startup ecosystem. Specifically, one of the things that we do together with more than 100 governments and partners like Crunchbase and SEMrush is ranking the startup ecosystems of 1,000 cities and 100 countries. So that's something that we're happy to do, and it's definitely something that makes sense. So that would be relatively good. And let me actually record this because I think we're going to send a recording to whoever not joining this talk. So still save this a little bit. Yeah, so that's a little bit about new stuff. So about StartupBlink, but we do want to say that generally the ecosystem that you choose is incredibly critical if you're looking for investors. And over here, you can see a list of, remember I told you that we're ranking the ecosystems of 1,000 cities, or actually 1,300 cities. It's all free. You can go to startuplink.com and see the table of 1,300 cities. It makes a lot of sense that you would think about, are you in the right place? And the reason is that the right place gives you access to many, many types of resources. More than anything, investors, and investors are have the tendency of only being in a few cities. So that's the sad realization of investors. There, you would probably not see them in villages and small towns. They are probably going to be in the biggest city in your country, or actually maybe even in your region, and so on and so on. So positioning yourself in a place like San Francisco, New York, London, Los Angeles, Boston makes a lot of sense if you're looking for investors. And again, you also have to customize it to your industry. Every city is good in a specific industry. So that's also something that you can look at the Startup Link. And other than investors, you also get access to high quality clients, to co-founders, team members, supplier, knowledge base. Bottom line, if you choose the right startup ecosystem, you're really setting yourself for success if it's possible. So that's something to take into account. There is someone that I really like called Naval Ravikant. He's the founder of AngelList, which is one of the biggest investment platforms in the world. And he says there are basically big three questions in life and in business. What are you working on? Who are you working with? And where you are. And we spend a lot of time about what we're working on, and also quite a little bit of time on who are we working with, who's going to be our co-founder. I don't think most of us spend enough time actually on where are we. And again, the place that you're going to choose is going to make your life much easier. That's the realization basically. So that's important to say. Good. So I'll just say a few quick words about myself. I'm sort of, as I'm running Startup Link, I'm also a digital nomad. And if you're interested in the idea of running a startup while moving around the world, I have a blog and a podcast called Become Nomad. So feel free for those of you who are also interested in lifestyle, not only business. Good. So let's start with speaking about why investors are necessary. Once again, if you have questions, I'll try to every few slides to have a look at your questions and see what's going on. So why are investors necessary? So it's important to say that most startups lose money in the first 3 years. The more technological your startup is, the more innovative your startup is, the more difficult it's going to be for you to achieve product market fit, which is the holy grail in the startup world. So the idea is that most of the startups are actually losing money in the first 3 years, and investors are exactly here to bridge this gap, to be in a situation that someone can cover you and your salary and your salaries of your team in those 3 years where you are on a path of trying to understand what is the business and who can it sell to and how can you grow. Investors are also mitigating the risk in case of failure. So let's say if you failed a startup, you lost a lot of your efforts and your time. Time is invaluable, but at least you didn't lose your money as well. So it makes sense, if you can, to share the risk of a startup and basically take the risk of the time on you, but at least share or pass the risk of the money to someone else. Having investors allows faster growth, scaling, experimentation. If you're doing things on a bootstrapping level, it takes a lot of time, which is good, by the way, because then you focus on what works. But if you have investors, you can run really, really fast. So that's something to think about. Create a barrier of entry. Let's say there is a new technology coming to town and you're really excited about it and you want to launch it and you want to grow really fast and to be the first one. Having investors really allows you to run and catch as much possible of the market share compared to doing it in a bootstrapping mode. By the way, I'm a big fan of bootstrapping. If I would have to choose between bootstrapping or getting investment, I would choose bootstrapping. But I can't really ignore also the massive advantages that investors are bringing. Um, Investors are especially relevant to big vision projects. The more your project has high R&D cost, it's something that is phenomenal, that is going to change the world and is extremely big. It can be extremely big in the future. The more you're going to need to do it with investors. You're very unlikely to be able to pull it off with your own resources. Some investors are smart money with emphasis on some. Smart money basically means that they can actually help you figure out your next step. They can guide you. They can help you prevent mistakes. They can guide you towards the right direction. So smart money is very, very good because it's money and it's also smart advice and smart connections. And investor connections can provide future investors. So the investors are your investor if they're smart money, they can connect you to your future investors. They can connect you to clients, to team members, to strategic partnerships, and they also have a lot of knowledge and guidance. Again, if they're smart money, so that's something to take into account. Talking once again about the debt element over here is why you don't want to fund it on your own if you can avoid it. There is a saying that if you think nobody cares if you're alive, try missing a couple of loan payments. So startups are difficult as they are. Also, being under the stress of paying back loans is not something that you want to do. So if you're in a situation that you have to take a loan to ignite your startup, you're much better off going for investors. And if you're in a situation that you can bootstrap your startup without loans, then you can maybe think about doing it on your own. So that's important to say as well. And and then again, we also have to present the story as it is. What is the current reality in the investment landscape? So a lot of us are thinking VCs and venture capitals and super angels and so on. Look, the big picture is that in the global startup ecosystem, the vast majority of money is our personal savings and credits. Now, the biggest investor that exists in the world, and that's funny, is actually family and friends. Family and friends are giving a lot of money to many, many, many startups that venture capital and angel investors are not going to even consider. And then you see the tiers of venture capital and angel investors. They're big, but we can't say that they're huge. Those guys and girls are very picky. They're very, very picky. The vast majority of startups that are trying to raise money will never raise money. So it's important to say that venture capital and the angel investor, which are the professional trench of the investment world, are very picky in what they do, and they have a lot more demand than supply. So that's important to say. Now, let's talk a little bit about raising money. Before you go into it, you have to understand this is a difficult thing. Something from Paul Graham, raising money is the second hardest part of starting a startup. The hardest part is making something people want. But the second biggest cause of death is probably the difficulty of raising money. Fundraising is brutal. And I want you all to remember this. This is not a walk in the park. Raising money is extremely difficult. And it's also going to slow you down. You're not going to be able to work on your product as you could before. It would create a lot of manic depressive events that you get a meeting with a great investor and then they ghost you, or they don't even arrive to the meeting, or they ignore all your emails, or you send hundreds of emails to potential investors, you get only 2 replies. It's difficult. It's nothing easy. So we have to also be very, very clear about this. If you're going on a raising investment money, you're going for a very, very big challenge as well. But we also mentioned before, what are the big advantages of actually doing that? Mahmoud is asking, where did I get the previous slide? Let me have a quick look. I will try to find it for you. That's a good one. Send me an email, eli@startuplink.com. I saw it, but I think we removed the source from here. So I'll get back to you. It was an interesting source, so I'll send you the link. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why would investors want in? What's in it for them? Okay, so and it's important to say the investors are different. They're not all made from the same cloth. Now, why is it critical for you? Because when you speak with someone, it's important that you know their incentives. Just like Charlie Munger said, tell me the incentives, I'll tell you the result. Over here, if you're speaking with a potential investor and you go with the same pitch, you're making it wrong. You have to do research about them and you have to understand what is it that they're after. And then you emphasize on this specific point. So some investors are normal. If they're normal, they just want return on investment, meaning they want to put money and they want to make a lot more money out of the money that they put. Others are just interested in diversifying portfolio of assets, which means that they have, let's say, a lot of money in stocks or bonds or whatever, and they say, look, I need a new tranche of assets that is totally different. So I have the diversification. In this case, whenever the interest rates are very low, they arrive. That's where those guys are arriving and basically saying, oh my God, startups, you must invest in startups. The bad news for us now is that the interest rates are actually pretty high now. And that means that everyone that arrived is now going back to bonds and to interest that gives them great interest. When the interest was 0%, they were running after you. Now we have a serious winter situation because they're all back to those 5% interest tools and don't want to take any more risk. So the total amount of supply of investment has greatly decreased in the last few years. So it's important to say. It's also fun. Some of them just want the fun and excitement to help create something new. So if you arrive with great vibes and whatever, even if your financial projections are not amazing, but you're like, wow, we're gonna do this and this, and you might get them on board. Some of them are interested in creating positive social impact. So when you speak with them, you have to kind of like say, look, we're going to impact 1,000 children in poor locations and so on. It might make a lot more sense to speak about that than speaking about the potential ROI. Again, the normal ones would be interested in return on investment. That's the most common thing. But I'm just saying everyone has different incentives. Some of them just want to take part in a business without running it. They sort of like have a boring life and they want something on the side that they go on meetings once a month and see how this thing progresses without really being responsible for it. And some of them just want to tell a cool story to their friends. Okay, you go to a dinner meeting with your friends, they're super rich, and they tell them, "Oh, I just invested in an AI startup and whatever." So it really depends on who do you speak with, and it's important to understand who do you speak with. It's going to greatly improve your chances of actually making it happen. So that's something to think about. Cool. Let's talk about what do they want to see. And the first thing that they want to see is actually you as the co-founders. Okay. So the idea is that you have to understand that you are the first item that is on display in this element when they choose if they're going to invest or not. What do they want in co-founders? First of all, they want unquestionable commitment to the project and enthusiasm. If you arrive there and you're sort of like, "Yeah, I'm not sure and whatever, it's a really red flag because they're really afraid that they're going to give you money and you're going to leave the project when things get tough in 3 or 4 years. So if you have passion for it and you project it, it's important. They're also going to be interested to see that there are good working relationships between the team. Many startups collapse because of team problems. So that's something that has to be said. Co-founders don't get along, whatever. So if you tell them, hey, I've been with my co-founder in the army for 4 years, we know each other and so on, we've done something before, they're going to be more relaxed than, hey, I just met my co-founders a month ago. They would know there's going to be issues. So that's important. They also, of course, want good chemistry between you and them. They would join something that they enjoy your company as well. So, and by the way, vice versa, you probably don't want investors that you don't really like. You now have partners in a way. So make sure you like your partners. They are also going to be interested if they're smart to make sure that they like you as well. They want to have total trust in the founders. So it's important if there are any red flags of something that you tell them is not correct, is might be a lie, or they might not be able to trust you. No way. By the way, that's the problem of low quality startup ecosystems. Generally, in low quality ecosystems, there is a trust issue. People are not sure they can trust other people. In San Francisco, in Tel Aviv, in New York, in London, the default is I trust. In places like, I don't know, Jamaica, for example, where I've been doing a project on their ecosystem, or Serbia or Croatia, there is less trust by definition, and then it's harder to raise investment. They're also going to be looking for a team with broad range of skills. You're doing something on AI. make sure that you have someone on AI. Like there has to be a product, a founder product fit in terms of why are you the right person to actually execute this startup. And if they feel like, oh my God, I have a Michael Jordan here and I on AI and I like even if the idea is not good enough, they're gonna say, I just believe in the person. The person is gonna figure it out later. So that's important to say. That's why we start first of all, before we even speak about what is your idea about and whatever, in the co-founders. And by the way, it means that you as the CEO, if you're the CEO, you have to build a very impressive team in order for them to basically go for it. And then again, the last thing would be previous startup experience. This is actually important, the idea of having people, if you have a track record, or let's say if you've accomplished things in previous startups, that's going to be incredibly easier for you to raise money if you have a track record of success before. So let's say if you had a startup before and you basically exited it for $5 million, boom, they're like now saying, this person can execute and they're ready for the next step, for the $500 million startup and so on. So it's important to know the doors are opening much faster for those that had previous success. That means that if you're just starting out, it's good, but you have to work really hard to get their trust in a way. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what do they want to see in the business as well. First of all, let me tell you a few words about how professional investors, the ones that are making a lot of money, what's their current strategy. It's called spray and pray. Basically, spray and pray means I want to invest in 30 companies. I know that 27 companies are going to fail. And I know that three or two or even one company is going to return my entire fund by becoming a unicorn and then create massive profits. What does it mean? It means that for professional investors, the really serious ones, if you're going to them, you have to not only show them, hey guys, if this business is successful and I'm very likely to be successful, you're going to get 5 times more than what you invested. No. Like you have to make sure that you have a big enough vision to actually tell them, show them how you can make amazing returns for them. So they're okay with you failing. 90% failure rate is fine with them. But you have to tell them why is it that in the 10% case that you're going to make it, why are you going to cover their entire fund? Don't speak about their fund. It's not your business. But why is it going to be so big if it's successful that it's worth a shot? That's how most of them are working. It's not regular business model of I'm investing $1 and I'm going to get $2 in 2 years. This is not the game we're playing here. This is why you might be investing $1 and get $100 in 5 years. That's much more interesting for them because of the mathematics of spray and pray. Okay, very important to say. Now, other thing, so if you're going to them, they would like to see a big market. They don't want small wins. They want giant wins. That's how the mathematics work. You have to understand that it's a little bit counterintuitive. Also, they would like to see things with barriers to entry. Why is it that you can do it and it's going to be very, very difficult for other people to basically execute it? Now, extremely recommended not to arrive to investors. Don't even dare to do it with an idea. You want to arrive to them with basically a prototype at least. And prototype is not going to be enough, especially not in the current period where investment is incredibly scarce. You also want to show them traction and hopefully revenue. Because traction and revenue validates product market fit, which is once again the holy grail. Most startups are dying because they don't have product market fit. So any signs or milestones that you've achieved that actually show that product market fit exists is better. I would not even go on this path of raising investment without having a functioning prototype and great traction or really good signs that you're saying, look, I have evidence that the world likes what I build. It's not based on an idea or an assumption. It's something much deeper than that. And it's going to be very helpful if you have previous investment and who joined the round. So if they're gonna, nobody wants to be the first one. So if you have great venture capital firm that joined you or an angel investor and whatever, gonna make their decision much easier and also who is joining the current round. If they're alone, they're depressing. If there is a big VC joining, much more impressive, and so on. It's not a must, but it's just helpful. All those things are simply helping to create what we call FOMO, fear of missing out. This is the strategy of invest. Like if you want investors, you just have to give them FOMO. Like you have to tell them, look, this train is leaving. Don't tell them, but you have to give them the feeling that this train is leaving and it's going to leave without them. And they can join, but it's leaving very, very soon. That's what basically pulls them into investing in your startup. So a few major elements to consider when you're negotiating with the investors. One is the valuation. The valuation is important because it determines two things. How much money are you getting so you can get things done? And what's going to be your dilution? And you, as a startup founder, want to keep as much as the equity with you because probably if you're doing a round now, it's not going to be your last round. It's going to be probably you're going to have at least four more rounds of investment. So remember, whatever you are diluted in now is not your final dilution. In 5 years, you're gonna be a lot more diluted. So that's important to remember. It's important to also negotiate the vision. What is it that you want to make of the company, and what is it that they're looking for? See that you're on the same page. Important to negotiate also your ability to make decisions. Some of them are going to block you and going to say, no, no, you have to report to me and you have veto rights and the board can block whatever you say and so on. Of course, the good ones will never do that if they pick good founders and they want to let them run. But unfortunately, there are many investors that suck, that they are not good investors. So some of those things have to be negotiated. And also the method and frequency of communication. Some of them would tell you, hey, send me an email every month. Some a quarterly would do. Some of them you would actually tell them, hey, I want to jump on a call with you every month because I need your advice and your connection. So all those things have to be spoken about. It seems like valuation is the biggest item here. Big discussions about does the company worth 7 million or 5 million and so on. Let me tell you, most of them, and you shouldn't as well, waste a lot of time on this. It's not actually a win-lose situation. You have both sides have an interest to get a right valuation in the right price. If, for example, they're tricking you into a super low valuation, you're going to be super depressed after because you're going to feel like a sucker. And then also, you won't be able to raise additional rounds of investment because the next investors that you're going to try to pitch to are going to tell you, what? You gave them 10% of the company for $30,000? We're not going to invest. You have bad judgment. So it's not for their interest as well to decrease you on the valuation. And by the way, it's also not on your interest to have a massive, massive valuation that is very high. The reason is that you're going to have more investment rounds in the future. So let's say you trick them into a massive valuation of 20 million when it should have been 5. Next round that you're going to have to raise, you're going to have to do a down round because this valuation was not logical. And you don't want to do a down round. It's depressing for absolutely everyone, including the new investors as well. Nobody wants to invest in a value lower than the last valuation. So just to conclude this discussion about valuation, it's a very good interest for both sides, if they're not total idiots, to basically reach a valuation that is fair. So don't worry about it too much. So that's sort of like important to say. Okay, let's go a little bit to the basics of what are the rounds, what are the investment rounds that exist in the world. So first of all, there is a pre-seed round. Pre-seed round is usually something of a runway to build a basic prototype, hiring one or two people. Usually the amounts over there are going to be between 30K in developing countries to 150K in more developed country. Again, you're just starting something. Usually you use something called convertible debt for that. We won't go deep into this topic. You can Google it, but you can also do equity. And the investors for pre-seed rounds are usually the three Fs. We're going to talk about them: friends, family, and fools. We're going to talk about it in a second. And small angel investors. Those are the ones that are doing the pre-seed. Then you have the seed rounds. Seed rounds is usually for companies that are already figuring now the product market fit. The sums over here are between 150K to 2 million. Average pre-seed, pre-money valuation of 3.5 million. The investors over here are going to be usually angels, super angels, and very, very early stage venture capitalists. And then you have Series A to Z. This is all about scaling. You found product market fit. Now we run towards massive growth and becoming a massive company. Over here, the amounts are between 2 million to 15 million, or even more after Series A. The investor over here are traditional venture capital like Sequoia and Andreessen Horowitz and so on. Um, that's those are basically the round. So whatever you raise, do know in which phase you are. It's important to sort of like if you're just starting out, don't go to venture capital. Like the idea is to sort of adjust what you do and who do you approach to in every stage. Well, let's talk a little bit about each one of those investors. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free in the chat. I'll try to get to it. There is also a QA button somewhere on Zoom. I don't know where. So let's talk a little bit about the free F investors, friends, fools, and family. I have to tell you, I was very, very against this thing. Like there is also a bad connotation to it. That's why the word fools is added usually. But I will tell you, as time passed, I understand also from the chart that we showed you before, they are incredibly important. And some people have made so much money for their family and friends for giving them the opportunity to join that it's actually a very, very important tier of investors. So those can be college friends, family members, your uncle, whoever. As we talked before, those are usually smaller amounts. The idea is that they invest in you as a person. They trust you. They trust your intentions. They trust your goals. And by the way, it's usually a good sign for investors. If you go for a professional investor and you tell them, hey, none of my family member or none of my friends gave me seed round, so I have to go to you or pre-seed, they would say, interesting. So your friends and family, you couldn't, none of them saw the potential. Some investors actually want to see the skin in the game. But by the way, it's also creates skin in the game. It's important because if I'm an investor and you don't know me and I give you money, I'm always afraid that you're going to quit on me. But if I know that your uncle also gave you money, then I know that you're going to think 5 times before you quit because you don't want to get into trouble with your uncle as well. So it's not necessarily a bad sign to have free the friends and family rounds. It's actually much more of a good sign than a bad sign. So that's important to say. So that's about that. Some advantage of those of friends and family. Minimal or no due diligence. They would just take your word for it. They would say, "Look, I trust you. I know you. I understand you. Go for it. You don't have to show me your financial projections in 5 years." The negotiation is relatively short. The contract will probably be in your favor. They're not professional investors. They won't put crazy clauses there about if we're not happy, we can fire you in a year and so on and so on. So it's much more relaxed in a way. They usually don't meddle in operation. They're, again, trusting in you. So they don't want to say, oh, you're making a mistake or whatever. You won't hear it that much for them. By the way, that's also a problem because they're usually not smart money. They won't correct your mistakes. And it's also good for them because they know you. And a random angel investor doesn't know you. Those people usually know you for 10 years. They can judge your skills, your intentions, your values, your morals, and so on and so on. They have a little bit of an unfair advantage of knowing you much better than the other investors. So that's cool. Disadvantages of friends and family. Usually it's not smart money. We talked about it. They won't be able to guide you in the process. If the startup fails, and it usually does, 90% of the times, by the way, or even more, you have caused damage to someone that is close to you. Massive disadvantage. And it might also affect your personal relationships. Let's say your uncle gave you a lot of money, and now you have very, very weird Thanksgiving dinners with your uncle for the next 30 years. So that should be said. Some advice on friends and family. So what I would do is the following: tell them, hey, it's going to be amazing, but you should know that 90% of the startups fail. Okay. So it's important if they're not in this world to let them know the stats, and those are the stats. So now you gave them important information. You're incredibly uh, uh, believing in your project and you're super excited about it, but 90% of startup fail. And also make sure that their life quality is not affected if the investment is gone. So if your uncle saved $150,000 and they want to give you $100,000, don't take it. But if your uncle has $2 million in the bank and they want to give you $100,000, you can take it. Okay, so that's basically the idea, a little bit with friends and family. A little bit about accelerators, another type of investor. Accelerators are programs which offer cash, usually less than 50K. Some of them, by the way, don't offer cash at all, and mentorship in exchange for a small amount of equity and 3 months of a program time. What are the advantages of joining accelerator? First of all, if you lack on knowledge, they're a good place for knowledge. Some people call them mini MBA. So you go there and they teach you and so on and so on. I still think that we have to get the knowledge ourselves, but it's a good one, especially if you really feel not so confident in your knowledge. Network. You basically go to an accelerator, you can meet people that can be your next clients or probably your co-founders and so on. The network is good, especially on investor connection. Those guys, if they're good, and by the way, the word if is very important here. There are some accelerators, just like investors, that absolutely suck, and you have to stay away from them. But if they're good, they can probably connect you to local investors. They do demo days, pitching events, and so on and so on. So that's important to kind of get from them if they are able to do it. And validation. If the accelerator has a great name, by the way, the best accelerator in the world, for example, YC, Y Combinator. The minute you get accepted into an accelerator like this, there is only one, all the others are much worse, then doors are opening, all the world is running after you. So there is this element of validation for Y Combinator, and if not, lower tier would be something like Techstars or something like that. So that's also a little bit important to discuss. So that's cool. Great. So disadvantage about the accelerators is basically variance. Again, some of them are freaking horrible. Some of them are great. You have to do your research. Time and relocation, some of them would ask you to relocate to another country. Some of them are going to take a lot of your time. And if their mentor are not good, you're just spending time and you're kind of like, what am I doing? I should be working on my product. So because they require your time, again, make sure that they're good. And equity. Joining an accelerator means sometimes giving up on equity. Be very, very careful on giving up on equity. If someone has 2%, they still have a percentage of your company. It means that it might complicate your future decision making. It means that your cap table, which is basically the ownership table, is now much more complex than what it was before. It's also a bad red flag for future investment. If you have too many, he has 2%, this accelerator has 1%, and whatever, be careful. Okay, make sure that it really, really is important. Okay, so that's important. We have a question here from Mahmoud about is there a study that shows that free F tend to give you more support than others? No, no. Actually, there is probably much more likelihood that they won't give you support because they won't know what are you working on and they're not professionals. And also because of the fear of the relationship, you won't be able to so much speak with them and tell them, hey, I have a big problem. I'm thinking about maybe closing the startup. So in terms of support, emotional and also business-wise, the friends and family are probably much worse than anything else that you see in this list. What you see in this list, let's go over to the next one, are basically angel investors. Angel investors are basically wild cards. Some of them are jokers and they're going to be absolutely amazing. Okay, depends how you look at jokers. There is also a movie where they're not so good, and some of them are really not good. You know that they're gonna make your life miserable and call you every day and tell you why are you not doing X, Y, Z, and so on and so on. Try to get smart money here. People that would really add value. Uh, a bonus point if there were entrepreneurs in the past and know what you're going for. Then again, you also have the super angel, the syndicates. You have places like where syndicates are forming, like AngelList, boutique VCs, and so on. And then you have the big venture capital. The venture capital is going only on IPO potential. If you can float your company, become at least a unicorn. Over here, you also have a CEO removal threat. Venture capitalists have zero tolerance for bad founders and bad CEOs. By the way, not necessarily bad, because if they will replace you and you still have the equity, they would bring someone better for the company, hopefully, and then you're gonna get rich out of it as well. But some of them are just making stupid mistakes. Um, some amazing founders like Travis from Uber and so on got fired by or also Adam Neumann from WeWork got fired by the VCs when it was clear in retrospect that maybe it would be better if they would stay. But usually those guys know what they're doing. I have to give them credit. When they remove a CEO, it's for a relatively good reason. So. And of course, they can also give you amazing connections to resources, to connections. So it makes sense to again think about that as well. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about strategic investors. We don't think about them too much. We're talking more than anything about the corporates. Let's say you're trying to build something, and maybe IBM or Samsung are doing exactly that, and they have a pain. You can actually go to their corporate venture fund or their investment fund and tell them about that, and you can build it together. Maybe you can build the product for them so they can pay you. You build them a product, but at the same time, you can also replicate this product for new clients. Maybe it's a strategic investment and they take part of the company. Maybe it's a partnership and so on. But the pros over here are basically that they give you resources and connection. The cons that you have to be aware of is that there is also a different startup culture over here. So when you deal with corporates, be careful. You're now entering a little bit of a landmine, a minefield in a way, because they're working in another way and they're very worried about risks that you wouldn't even give a damn about as a startup. So very interesting element. I know a lot of people that actually build their startup by getting this basically getting support from those corporates, but we just have to be a little bit careful here in terms of the culture more than anything. Now, before we are approaching professional investors, the advice, I'll just repeat a little bit, don't just present an idea. Prototype, traction, proof of product market fit. The more you have it, the more easy it's going to be for you. So instead of presenting to 1,000 and getting 2 meetings, you're going to present to 10 and get 2 meetings. So try to advance as much as possible on your own so you can actually make those conversion rates much higher. Skin in the game, talking about this again, you can't go to an investor and tell them I need $10,000 or $20,000. They will tell you, why don't you put the money yourself? If you believe in this, skin in the game from you or your family and friends is important. And if you're unable to raise this money from yourself, family, and friends, red flag, especially in developed countries. And again, enthusiasm is addictive. Arrive with enthusiasm. How do you find your investor? So, the bad news is that you probably already know them. So, what am I trying to tell you now? If you're now looking for investors, if you don't know them, you're very unlikely to find them. So the point over here is that you, even if you're not looking for investors now, but you know that you're going to need investors in 1 year, start working on the relationships right now, because nobody likes a cold email in the last minute. Everyone does business with people they know. So the idea over here is work on building your investor network way before you're looking for investors. Okay, so that's very important. You should know them when you look for investors. You don't do cold outreach then. Introductions are very important. Like if you're unable, some investors have said, and I listened to it in podcasts, that if you don't know how to get to them via a shared connection, you're not connected and you don't know what you're doing. So basically, the ability of you to build again your network in advance and to be in a situation that you know a founder that got invested by an investor to make the connection, it's going to be so much better than a cold email. Most investors are not investing in someone that did cold outreach. They want someone to vouch for you. And again, brings us to the point, work on your network now, your network of founders, your network of investors, and so on, because it's really important. People, for example, that know investors are usually accountants, lawyers, and so on and so on. But of course, more than anything, founders. Build a network with founders, make them your friends that got investors. So in 1 year, they can give you a referral. You can go to co-working events like WeWork. Sorry, it's really noisy in New York, but you probably hear a lot of background noise. But those are good places to kind of like mix with people, get to know them. Also, try to go to as many meetups as possible and events. That's where you're gonna find them. They're gonna be there with a glass of wine. Start speaking with them. You never know who you're speaking with. Pitch as much as possible. Again, you never know who you're speaking with. You actively search and pitch everyone that you meet. I'm telling you, there is nothing worse for getting investors for being afraid of sharing your idea that someone steals it. Stealth mode is for rich people. For rich people. And if you're not rich and you can't fund your startup, be very confident of sharing it and try to get and evangelizing it instead of hiding it. By hiding it, you will never get investors. And of course, go through your own Rolodex, your LinkedIn account, send messages, ask for introductions. Again, intros are very, very good. Now, I do want to say that your clients or your mentors can also be your potential investors. Let's say if you have a client and they're super impressed with you, if they're a corporate or even a client, they might say, wow, I really like what you're doing. Let me put some money. Um, and mentors as well. Basically, there is a saying that when you ask for investment from people, they give you advice, because they're like in a defensive mode. Oh, okay, you want money from me? Let me tell you what's wrong with your business. But if you ask for advice from people, okay, then you find investors. Because then they say, okay, they don't ask for money from me, they just want advice. And you start thinking about it and say, sometimes you would say, wow, this is actually a great idea. Can I invest in this? Even though you're not looking for me to invest in it. So a little bit of psychological games over here are important. And of course, try to pre-launch marketing. You should have hopefully a newsletter, a Twitter, a Facebook where you share things. You go to events, you do PR. If you manage to get some press, it's also good, not only for clients but also for investors. I wouldn't recommend PR agencies, but at least do PR on your own if you can. So that's great. And thank you, FV, for the advice. Yeah, you can also do that. Definitely, there are a lot of stakeholders that can be potential investors over here. So that's great. A little bit about direct contact methods. So to avoid spending time on the direct path, here are a few things you can do. So one of the things that people are doing is basically you start talking with them on the blogs. Many of the best investors in the world, they have blogs like Brad Feld and so on, or there are quite a few others that have their blogs. And I blank out on the name of the investor of two sides of the table, also great blog. So a lot of them have blogs. You can comment on this and so on. It's pretty cool as well. So Google for lists. There are lists of investors on Google. You can actually search for them and then just work your way through the list. And again, do not think you're going to have 50% answer rates. Do know that there is much more demand than supply. So have a great startup, have a great pitch, and so on and so on. And also get ready for rejections and disappointments, and mostly people ignoring you. It's a number game, also at the end of the day. LinkedIn connections is actually better than emails. Is actually LinkedIn connection. You send a quick connection request. Can I get coffee? Can I get, again, advice, not investment, advice? It's also good. There are platforms like AngelList and so on that have investors in them. You can also mix a little bit there. And whoever told you no, but took the time to actually tell you no, because the vast majority are totally going to ignore you. You're not even going to receive the no from them. And keep in connection with them, you know, tell them, hey guys, I just want to update you, it's now 6 months after, I reached a few very interesting milestones and I really value your advice, so just wanted to update you on this. And they, after some time, when they see that you're actually very successful and you actually stuck with the startup and you reach some interesting milestones, then things might change. So that's important. A little bit, we're almost out of time, but a little bit about the documentation. I'll be very brief here. A pitch is very important. What do I mean by a pitch? Not even a presentation. In many, many cases, you would have less than 1 minute for an investor. You met them in an elevator, right? So you met them in an event and they have to go and whatever. Practice your pitch. I'm doing XYZ and whatever. In about 15 seconds, you should be able to kind of get them into saying, oh, I want to know more. This is really, really interesting. So practice your pitch. It's good to have an executive summary. It's very good to have a presentation. Presentation the slide decks is actually now the way to go. And of course, work on email templates and customize the email template to each investor about which investment they've done in the past, which industries they're interested in, what has worked in your previous templates, and so on. So that's cool. Financial projections and business plans are really not necessary anymore. The presentation will do just fine. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that as maybe a closing thing. Use a proofreader for your templates. Make sure that your templates are really good. They're not ChatGPT. They're basically something that is really, really cool. Customize it for per investor. People can smell templates. Like if you customize it, but I've seen that you've invested in this, and I really appreciated the work you've done in Y and X and Y. That says to them, hey, they're not sending 100 emails that are the same. They actually took the time to figure out who I am. And again, there is also work here with Excel. Probably again, you don't have a list of 4 people. You have a list of about 200 potential investors, if not more. So track them. Have someone that helps you with this. So that's good. Makes sense to filter within by industry. There are some investors that are interested in one industry and not interested in another one. So it's important to do that as well. Your location is going to be very, very important. Again, sometimes you have to work and go to another startup ecosystem, to go to another city. So it's sad, but if you're looking for investors, extremely important to be in the right place. Again, StartupBlink, you go for free, table with 1,300 locations, improve your location. If you're looking for investors, try to aim as high as possible. Um, and yeah, and again, really try to adjust the amount that you're trying to receive. With if you're trying to raise now $100,000, don't even speak with VCs. VCs don't write checks of less than 1 million or 2 million. So a lot of things are very important. And of course, if you're lucky enough to get an email reply really, really fast. Don't wait on it. So I think we have a few other slides, but we don't have time. We've been talking about this for an hour. It's really, really great to see you here. We're gonna do more webinars. We're gonna try to cover more topics in the future. In the time being, once again, thank you IBM for sponsoring this, and I really recommend their startup program. Once again, equity free, a lot of resources. And thank you everyone for commenting, and definitely we'll try to send you. We'll share the presentation. We'll share the recording with you as well. And yeah, looking forward to see you in the other webinars as well. It was really, really fun to do this event. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.